So seeing the Thing fight the Juggernaut is pretty amazing, but it's not the only thing that he has to deal with in this comic. This miniseries is actually amazing. So this is the second part of the Thing story that we covered. The first part, of course, is the one where the Thing humbles Bullseye. But for those of you guys who have forgotten, essentially what we learned is that Ben Grimm was approached by just like a childhood bully named Marty. And Marty was talking to Ben about how basically his niece had gone missing. And so Ben Grimm, of course, helps him out and tries to find his niece, only to run into like Bullseye, who apparently has super strength now in the comics. And there's no real indicator of where he got it from, but all these clues and this whole road ends up leading to Hammerhead, right? Just a pretty minor villain within Marvel Comics, but they've basically been kidnapping kids and then taking them to this warehouse, and nobody ever really knows what happens to them outside of rumors that they're quote-unquote scraping them for superpowers. But in the midst of it all, where Ben Grimm had found the young girl, the whole warehouse just explodes, like fire everywhere, so no one knows what's going on. And that's where this story picks up, because this girl comes out of here, right? And she's just like, someone help me, right? Like, somebody help. Now, of course, Ben sees this, Hammerhead sees this, and then it's like, Bullseye, go and grab that girl. And so at that point, Ben Grimm makes quick work out of Hammerhead. And I mean, he makes very fast work out of this guy. He grabs him and just throws him right out into the middle of nowhere. Bullseye seems to be the only one that is at the very least able to understand what's going on, because when he looks at this girl, his response is just like, what the Hulk? And so at that point, there's a couple of henchmen that open fire on Ben Grimm. Of course, he protects the girl as best he can, and then grabs her to get out of there as fast as they possibly can, because everybody there is going to try to kill them. But before they do, there is a kind of sit down, right, where he basically talks to her, because she's a terrified young girl, right? I mean, she has no clue what's going on. She's scared out of her wits. And so he's just like, I'm Ben, right? I'm going to get you home. He says, I'm friends with basically your uncle, or at least he knows her uncle, because her uncle was kind of a childhood bully for Ben Grimm back in the day. But the crazy thing about this is that Marty was here when all this went down, and that Marty's nowhere to be seen, because Marty basically led Ben here, or at least between the two of them working together, they ended up here. But the reality is that with the explosions continuing to go off, Bullseye shows back up again, right? And he was like, don't take another step. Now, here's the thing to understand, right? That while you do have Ben Grimm, who is difficult for Bullseye to take out, it's not impossible. If you can be killed, Bullseye will find a way to kill you, and there's no getting around that, right? Mullet Man had that perfect intro in his video, right? Like, if Bullseye wants to kill you, you are going to die, and that is it, right? So that's what goes on here. Not so much that he kills Ben Grimm, but that Ben realizes that he needs to get this girl out of here, because with this prolonged fight between himself and Bullseye, there's no telling what could happen with this young girl. So Ben Grimm just splits the dock, right? They fall into the water. He takes off, and during that whole instance, when Hammerhead's in the water with Bullseye, Kingpin calls. Somehow or another, he's able to talk to them over a phone that is connected to the car as the car is sinking. It's comics, guys. Just enjoy the ride, because it's amazing. The funny thing about this is that in the conversation between the two, Kingpin indicates to Hammerhead, look, I really shouldn't have trusted you with this, right? I mean, I guess I could have, but the reality here is that you can't keep this contained. And so what he does is he puts out a bounty on Ben Grimm. $10 million. And it's not for any particular purpose. Kingpin goes full John Wick here, right? He's like, $10 million on the first person to take out Ben Grimm and bring the girl to me. So now all bets are off, man. It's the plot to the Warriors. It's absolutely amazing, because the whole time this girl's like screaming, right? While Ben Grimm's taking her, she's just screaming, she's panicking, right? Terrified out of her wits, right? She's like, I don't like heights. Why is this happening? And even Ben doesn't fully know. He doesn't have all the answers to this, right? He just says, look, I don't know why those men want you. I promise, though, I will not let them take you back. That's why we're up here, to keep you out of sight until I can get you someplace safe, to get you back to your mom. And that's where she's like, I mean, my mom knows you, or at least knows of you, right? Like, she makes us watch, like, whenever it is that you're on the news. And he just says, I went to school with her, right? I went to school with your mom, right? She was really nice to me when we were kids. And so, she's a good parent. And so that's where this girl introduces herself as Sarah. And so Ben asks her, he's like, Sarah, can you tell me what happened in the warehouse? Did you see what was going on? Did you see your Uncle Marty in there? And she just says, I saw when he came in, right? He sneaked in. I was scared, and then I saw him, and then he didn't. And then he just wasn't there anymore. She just says, like, there was fire all over the place, and Sarah just kind of starts crying, right? And at that point, Ben's just like, listen, kid, I don't know what level of comforting you're comfortable with here. And at that point, she just grabs him, right? Just gives him like a great big huge hug. And then actually starts to fall asleep. And then Ben Grimm starts to fall asleep, which is kind of this adorable moment, right? This really tender moment between the two of them, right? Which is promptly woken up by the Wrecking Crew, right? Like, who immediately show up. Now, the Wrecking Crew were never major villains. And here's a question I have for you guys. Should we start going through and making videos on like all these just super minor villain groups? Hammerhead, maybe Tombstone, it doesn't really seem to be featured in here. The Wrecking Crew, which is kind of dope actually, right? Like, these guys are small time. However, the Wrecker is kind of the thing that the entire crew revolves around, right? Hence the name, which is to say, with Dirk Garthwaite, I know it's a crazy name to have. Technically, he had magical enhancements that were given to him by a woman named Carnilla. Over time, it's enchanted his crowbar to the point that his crowbar is magically enchanted. And in fact, there's been times where his crowbar functions like Mjolnir, which is to say he can throw it and then recall it. But of course, he has like super strength and stamina and all that kind of stuff. When you look at someone like Thunderball, right, his whole ball and chain has been enhanced because of exposure to the energies of Dirk Garthwaite. So it goes on and on and on and on. But at the end of the day, they were never like a major group, right? There was never an instance where it's like the Wrecking Crew demolish Avengers Mansion and take out everybody except for the Incredible Hulk, and the Incredible Hulk like flees, right? There's never like a Wrecking Crew kills the Marvel Universe story, although that would be absolutely amazing if there was. And so in turn, he goes to attack Ben Grimm, and Ben Grimm of course blocks the crowbar. It's enough to damage his rocky hide, but he blocks the crowbar, and then at that point, they have to contend with Ben being slightly pissed off. The funny thing about this though is that Ben doesn't know about the $10 million bounty. He thinks they're basically agents for Hammerhead, and he just asks, like, did Hammerhead send you too? And he's like, Hammerhead, like, buddy, where are you getting your intel? And that's where Ben says Hammerhead, Bullseye, Melvin Potter, the Gladiator, all of them juiced up with some not brand extra super strength. And so the crew is just kind of like, what is this guy talking about, right? And that's where Ben's like, wait, you guys don't have super strength? And the Wrecker's just like, well, you tell me, home slice, and just like sends him flying off the roof, pummeling down to the ground below, right? Bulldozer's supposed to grab this guy. And so Ben Grimm is like, look, we don't have time for this. Although there is a hilarious moment where Wrecker comes running up on Ben and he's like, time to go back to sleep, and like goes to hit him with the crowbar. Ben just like grabs the crowbar, takes it away from Dirk, and just starts smacking the other members of the Wrecking Crew around. Clobbers Dirk with his own crowbar. It's like beating Thor with his own hammer, right? Shooting a guy with his own gun. It's just something you don't do. And so during all of this, Ben is just like picking on children for no good reason. And that's when Dirk kind of lets slip what's going on, right? He says, we have a good reason, 10 million good reasons. Big man put a bounty on your head, dead or alive. And Ben's just like, a bounty? Are you serious? And he's like, dude, it's $10 million? He's like, I'd kick my own ass for that much money. I turned myself in for 10 million bucks. And he's like, but tell me though, how are you boys planning on spending your millions after I've shattered every bone in your bodies? Because at that point, not only does he have the Wrecker's crowbar, he's got Thunderball's ball and chain. And so at that moment, it's a fool's errand to fight Ben Grimm, because this guy with these two weapons, oh dude, he would pummel the Wrecking Crew so bad, their children would be born feeling the pain that their fathers were experiencing when they were hit by Ben Grimm. It's kind of crazy, right? So these guys just flee, right? These guys just take off. And that's where Ben Grimm's like, tell your big man that he's gonna have to send some much tougher guys if he wants to take down the thing, which fortunately Kingpin did, because that's when the Juggernaut shows up. And here's the crazy thing about Kane Marco. This guy is not easily defeated. And the fights between Ben Grimm and Juggernaut over the years have been the stuff of legend. But one thing to be aware of, though, is that there are some groups that chose not to be a part of this. They didn't want to have anything to do with it. The Serpent Society is an example of that, right? The Serpent Society is like, no. We're not going to go fight. Are you serious? The Thing? Right? They want us to fight the Thing. That's not going to happen, right? That's never going to happen. So they don't want to have anything to do with any of that, right? They're like, yeah. And so at that point, you jump back to Juggernaut and Ben Grimm. And here's the funny thing, man. Juggernaut doesn't pull any punches, right? This guy pulls no punches whatsoever. And so where Ben Grimm is like, Sarah, kid, are you okay? The response to Juggernaut, neither of you are going to be okay. And Ben like tells him to stop. He's like, wait, like, do not do this. And Juggernaut's just like, no such luck, Rockface, right? Nothing can stop the Juggernaut. And Ben Grimm kind of stops him to a degree, but it's important to understand there's a big difference between bringing Juggernaut to a dead standstill and slowing Juggernaut down. So like he's still pushing you, but not quite the same. And that's exactly what's happening, right? Like Ben Grimm has his hand out and he's slowing the Juggernaut down, but he's not physically stopping him. And so that's where Ben is just like, okay, I bet I could if I had 2 free hands. And he's like, big tough guy ambushing me when I'm holding an 8-year-old kid. But then Ben Grimm is attacked from behind by none other than Black Tom Cassidy. Now, Black Tom Cassidy, here's the thing, man. Black Tom Cassidy was always one of my favorite villains in Marvel Comics just because of his ties to the X-Men universe, but he never got any respect. But he is potentially one of the most powerful beings on all of Earth in Marvel Comics because this guy controls plant life. So like, think of Poison Ivy or Swamp Thing on Earth in Marvel Comics without the whole tapping into the green. And in fact, I think it would make a good question of who's more powerful, right? Black Tom Cassidy or like Swamp Thing. But the point is this, Black Tom Cassidy and Juggernaut have been friends and allies for a number of years. So where one of them goes, the other one is sure to follow. But if you're able to get the upper hand on one, you could potentially get the upper hand on the other. And that's exactly what Ben Grimm does, that he realizes he cannot beat the Juggernaut here. And even if he did fight the Juggernaut here, this would lead to catastrophic damage of the city, to say nothing of the fact that Sarah is going to get killed, right? She would die 100% in that fight, because Juggernaut doesn't really care about her. Juggernaut's just here to kill Ben Grimm, or at least take Ben Grimm alive back to the Kingpin. And so that's why Black Tom Cassidy says, we're about to pull in a tidy sum for your Blarney hide, which I don't even know what that means. But he says 10 million American. Did you know that? What do you reckon makes you so valuable? And Ben's just like, you know, I've been trying to figure that out too. Maybe it's my sparkling personality. Because at that point, he grabs Black Tom Cassidy. Juggernaut flips over the fact that Black Tom Cassidy is being manhandled by Ben Grimm. And Ben's just like, you want him? Go get him. And just like throws this guy to the other side of the city. So Juggernaut takes off to go after Black Tom Cassidy. And notice this, right? Ben Grimm is just like, we need to get out of here before they come back. Because when they do, it'll be on like Donkey Kong. So literally he goes bolting around, he turns a corner, finds a payphone, and calls the Fantastic Four, only to find out they're not home. They left. They went back to the negative zone. So Ben is just like, they really left me here while they went on a mission. Like, come on. And so that's where you pick up with Moonstone. Right, it's all just like these B and C list villains in Marvel Comics, and I am here for it. But do not misunderstand, Moonstone is really, really interesting because she's one of these characters where she got her abilities by way of an artifact, specifically the Gravity Stone of the Kree, and where you would think that the nature of the Gravity Stone is that it would turn her something into a being like Graviton, right, who literally manipulates gravity itself. It basically just took over her nervous system and permeates her body with energy that just gives her like super strength, speed, stamina, which is kind of where like the minor villain aspect of her character comes from. But she does have the ability to do things like shapeshift, so it is kind of cool when you look at her character and how interesting she can be in certain situations. But she just kind of like starts smacking Ben Grimm around. Not enough to like overtake this guy, but enough to like catch his attention. But here's the thing, right? I mean, Ben Grimm is all about equality, right? Equal rights and equal lefts. And that's exactly what he does, right? Like this equality gets dished out in spades. He just like starts pummeling this girl around while trying to get Sarah out of there at the same time. And where she keeps on chasing him, right? He puts a haymaker on her and just knocks this girl out cold. And so he's like, somebody put a $10 million bounty on our heads, kid. Either that or these are just naturally violent people. And so once he and Sarah turn a corner, Rhino is there and Rhino comes running up on him, right? And he's just like, Rockman is mine. And the girl's just like, is that a rhinoceros? And so like Ben Grimm's there trying to keep this girl protected while Rhino is just like beating on him. At the same time, Jigsaw shows up, who's traditionally a Punisher villain. And they literally call him Jigsaw because his face looks like a jigsaw jigsaw puzzle. The guy's also one of the most sadistic killers in the entirety of Marvel Comics. And so literally Ben Grimm backhand both those guys, sends those guys falling, only to be caught up with by Grizzly and Hatemonger. Hatemonger is advertiser-friendly leader of the Third Reich in Germany in the 1930s, right? It's literally who that guy is. We have to say advertiser-friendly because if I say his name, YouTube will demonetize the entire channel, right? So yeah, that's basically what happens with that dude. But it's a crazy thing, right? Because Ben Grimm is just like, yeah, no, like we're not gonna deal with that, right? He literally just like runs away from those guys because he doesn't take him seriously. He turns another corner and you have Red Ghost and his super apes waiting on Ben, right? So Ben's just like, are you serious? He's like, number one, I'm not punching any monkeys today. And even then, they're coming out of the woodwork, man. They're literally coming out of everywhere because when he turns to run away, you have all these villains that just confronted him, all chasing after him. And so at that point, he goes right back the direction that he came before. He runs past Moonstone, who's just like round two home slice, right? She's barely able to hold it together, right? So she's no threat at all. And Ben just goes bailing down the street. You have Rhino and Grizzly, who were just knocking over every vehicle in their path. And Ben's just like, okay, like, this is getting ridiculous because at that point, he's confronted by the Sinister Six. Dude, they're coming out of everywhere. This comic is everything. I'm sorry I'm so excited, people. It's an exciting comic because he looks at that and he was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, really? What even is this? So on one side, it's the Sinister Six. On the other side, it's a handful of B-list villains. And literally Red Ghost is just like, everybody let's team up, right? There's plenty of bounty for everyone. And so with all that chaos and pandemonium going on, Kingpin calls up Hammerhead, and it's just like, they're making too much noise, right? They're bringing way too much attention. And Hammerhead is just like, respectfully, Mr. Fisk, what did you think was going to happen? When you put a $10 million bounty on a member of the Fantastic Four, the most easily spotted superhero in the entirety of New York City, if you wanted this handled discreetly, maybe it wasn't prudent to unleash every villain in the tri-state area on him. And that's where Kingpin's just like, yeah, sometimes I make rash decisions. It's the most Kingpin response that you could get. And so Hammerhead's just like, look, I called in reinforcements, right? The professional kind. And these ones are jacked up on the same stuff that we had Bullseye on. And Kingpin's just like, I'm beginning to suspect that our product is less than ethically sourced. Is that why we're seeing all of this commotion? And Hammerhead's just like, look, here's the thing, man. Do not worry about that, right? Like, we have this arrangement for a reason. You keep your hands clean up there, and I'll manage things down here in the dirt. And so these professionals that Hammerhead is talking about here are actually no joke, because what happens is when Ben Grimm runs down into a subway station to get away from all the chaos on the surface, he's confronted by Madam Viper. Now, let me tell you something about Madam Viper. Madam Viper, this chick is OG double OG. She is legitimately one of the best killers out there in the Marvel Universe. And depending on what the situation is, sometimes she's a contract killer, sometimes she's just out there to take you, right, whisk you away to whoever it is that wants you for torture or whatever the case happens to be, but she is exceedingly capable. And that's why she just says, hand over the girl and we will not kill you. And the girl's just like, Ben, I do not like this, right? I do not like enclosed spaces. And he just says, don't worry, it's Madam Viper, right? He's like, I'm dog tired and I've been fighting for days. I've been punched and kicked and blown up and shot. A gorilla zapped me with magnetism powers. But if you think a bunch of dorks in jumpsuits, and that's where like they immediately attack him with all their vaunted strength, which is why I say Madam Viper is no joke here, because she walks up on this girl while all of her super-powered henchmen are just pummeling Ben Grimm, and she just says, don't worry, child, the scary rock man will not bother you any longer. And the girl's just like begging, right? She's like, Ben, get up, right? You have to help me, man. And Ben's like, stay away from the kid. And that's where Madam Viper just says, let us help you. And the girl's like, no, right, let me go. And Madam Viper just says, right, we're taking you back to the doctors. They'll take care of you and they'll take care of everything. And the girl's just like, I said no, and just like screams as loud as she can and lets off this massive explosion because it turns out she's the one who blew up the warehouse. So if up to this point, you guys were like, there's something going on with that girl, like she's got powers or something, you 100% nailed it, right? Vindication, you were right. And so at that point, Ben's just like, okay, please tell me that you're not gonna blow up like that again, right? There's innocent people all over the place up there. And the girl's just like, I need my mom, right? And so with nightfall coming, it's a chance for Ben Grimm to grab Sarah and to get them back to Yancy Street, which is, where she says that she's from, but Ben already knows. And so no one's really able to spot them because they can kind of bob and weave and duck and hide, and it's much easier to hide in the nighttime. And so they show up to Sarah's apartment, and Sarah's mom, Shelly, is all kinds of excited to see her daughter and everything. And so at that point, Ben just kind of starts filling her in on everything that's going on. He's like, I'm still trying to piece it all together, but they had her down at the docks, right? Goons, henchmen types. And it sounds like there were some doctors there too. She can tell it better than I can. And I think they were taking people with, powers. And that's where she asked, like, did you know that your daughter has abilities? And Shelly's just like, I knew she was different and I knew she was special, but like, we didn't really know that she had powers in the traditional sense, which the implication here is that Sarah's potentially a mutant in Marvel Comics. We don't know if anything will come of it, but that seems to be the indication here. And so Ben's just like, okay, right, it's going to be okay. I know people who can help you, right? Families have been through this same kind of thing before. But he says, Shelly, listen, your brother Marty, there was an accident at the docks and he didn't make it. And that's when you see Marty in the house, right? She's like, what are you talking about? Like, Marty's fine. He's right over there. And Sarah's just like, no, right? She immediately starts to panic and she starts to freak out. And she's like, he's not supposed to be here, right? Like, I thought I was safe from him because Marty is the actual guy behind it all. Because at that point, Ben's just like, okay, so a little kid who's terrified of you, Marty, what have you been up to, right? What are you doing? And even Shelly is just like, Marty, what's she talking about? And Marty's like, I don't know, right? Kids, like sometimes they just say crazy things. And Ben's like, look, man, I've been through a lot getting this little girl back here, and I'm full of all kinds of frustration. Now, either you can answer those questions, or I can take my frustration out on you. It's your choice. And so at that point, Marty just kind of starts spilling the beans, right? He says, I knew a guy who knew this other guy who'd pay money if you brought them people with powers. And so Ben's just like, are you serious? Right? And he's like, it wasn't like that, right? I wasn't going to like sell the kid, right? I was just going to stay there with her while they did the thing and then bring her back, right? Like we needed the money. And so at that point, Shelly's just like, Sarah, go to your room. Uncle Ben and your mom are going to have a discussion with your Uncle Marty. And no matter what you hear, do not come out until we tell you to. Because at that point, he just says, right, they had this thing where they would scrape people's powers and use it to make other guys stronger. Like, I don't know how they did it. They had scientists and stuff, And she's like, scrape, right? Like, what are you talking about? He's like, it wasn't supposed to hurt her. I was going to be there the whole time. But then Hammerhead didn't see the point in doing business with anybody like me, so he just took her. And so she's like, I want you out of this house right now, right? Like, I want you out of our lives, gone forever. And he's like, wait, like I knew I could get her back, right? I'm friends with the ever-loving thing. And Ben's like, we are not friends, right? Like you were a dickhead bully when we were younger. And so Shelly's like, I'm calling the cops, right? Like you sold my daughter. And Marty responds with the worst statement he could have possibly made. He's like, no, I didn't sell her. I rented her. And her mom flips. Shelly absolutely loses it, right? It takes Ben Grimm pulling Shelly off of Marty to keep Shelly from beating this guy within an inch of his life. And so at that point, Hammerhead shows back up again, except this time he's empowered. Not only that, he's brought his henchmen. And so while Hammerhead deals with Ben Grimm, the henchmen grab Shelly and they grab Sarah and they intend to like whisk them away. And then at that point, Sarah's powers manifest. She explodes on the scene and she walks up to Marty and she's like, you were supposed to keep me safe. You were supposed to protect me. And she's like a hair's breadth away from killing this guy. And then Ben Grimm gives her like one of the coolest statements ever, one of the most amazing statements ever, which honestly, I feel like in this day and age, a lot of us kind of need to hear, right? He like talks to her. He doesn't like grab her and like yank her away from Marty or anything like that. He just talks to her. And he was like, you gotta let him go. And she says like, I can't, right? He made me do this. He made me do all of this. And Ben just says, you can't let bullies control you, Sarah. Bullies are weak people, right? They think it makes them strong to hurt people smaller than them. But people who are actually strong would never pick on somebody weaker. And he's like, your uncle, this guy, is the weakest person on this whole block. I mean, look at the guy. The guy's life is a mess. He couldn't get his life together if it was a puzzle made of 3 pieces, right? Running around talking about how he used to beat up a little kid 20 years ago. He lives in the past because he has nothing in the present day. And that's the crazy thing, because he says, I know you've got a rage in you now, and I'm so sorry. And like, I know these men made you feel bad, but they can't make you be bad. That part of having power is knowing when it's the right time to use it. And that's where Sarah's just like, but how do you know when it's the right time? And Ben's just like, you'll know, right? And then, of course, I mean, you guys know it was coming, right? Ben's just like, you want to know what I call it when I know it's time? And he just like whispers in her ear and she just kind of smiles, right? And so Hammerhead, of course, steps back up again with some of his henchmen. He goes to confront Ben, right? And he's just like, so are we going to do this all over again? Just give us the girl so we don't have to push your face through the sidewalk a second time. And Ben's just like, yeah, so like, here's the thing. Something you need to understand here. I've been holding back. Like, you know that. You think I punch a guy in a pinstripe suit the same way that I punched the Hulk? And that's where Hammerhead's just like, you're bluffing, right? Like, we were about to crush you. And so like the whole of Yancy Street at this point, right? Like all the folks on his block, because Ben Grimm coming from Yancy Street, all the folks on Yancy Street love him, right? Like he will literally let the world burn before he lets anything happen to the folks on Yancy Street. He's like, you really think I'm bluffing? He's like, go ahead and ask these people if I'm bluffing, right? Like they know who I am, and everyone around here is just like, yeah, you're about to get your ass handed to you, Hammerhead. Like you have no clue what's about to happen to you, right? And like everybody's just kind of cheering on Ben Grimm, and Hammerhead's just like, you idiots don't know anything. He's like, after I'm done with this, I will burn this whole street to the ground. And Sarah just looks up at Ben and she's like, is it time? And Ben's like, yeah, kid, right? Tell him what time it is. And she's like, it's clobbering time. It's the most amazing thing ever, right? Like this 8-year-old girl just like yelling out clobbering time. And Ben Grimm helps Hammerhead understand his place in the bigger picture, right? And like Hammerhead basically starts begging at that point, right? He's like, this is a mistake, right? You're dealing with people who do not play. And Ben's like, yeah, I know, I'm one of them because I don't play. And just pummels this guy. Right now, of course, at that point, it leads to the cops showing up, and the cops basically respond by whisking away, whoever they can, and so on and so forth. But the fact is, when everything just kind of calms down and Ben is talking to Shelly literally says, right, like, I'm worried I'm not going to know how to take care of a kid who's different, right? Like, does she need special classes? Like, I don't know anything about any of that stuff. And Ben's just like, I mean, no one really does, but you kind of know already, right? Just love her. She's your daughter. Just treat her like your daughter. Don't treat her any differently than you would if she didn't have any abilities. And he's like, when you have questions, you can call me up, right? I live with the smartest man in the world, plus a super mom who's basically got it all. And then I got a buddy who can light himself on fire, right? And that's where the question is like, what's going to happen to my brother? And Ben Grimm is like, don't worry about that. I got your brother taken care of. So Ben literally snatches Marty up and takes him over to the Kingpin's office after kicking a hole in the wall. Right? He doesn't use the door. He just kicks a hole in the wall just to inconvenience Kingpin. And Ben Grimm freaks out. Right? He's pissed. He's like snatching up little kids, scraping their superpowers off. Like, is that your business? And Kingpin plays coy initially, right? He's like, I don't really know what you're talking about. And Ben's like, he sold his 8-year-old niece to your guy Hammerhead, kept her locked up at your warehouses. Do you know about that? Right? And Kingpin's just like, I'm a legitimate businessman. I would never do anything like that. And Ben just like walks away, right? He's like, save it for the cops. And that's where Kingpin's like, dude, I own the cops, right? I own this entire town. And as Ben's just kind of walking away, he was like, yeah, well, you don't own Yancy Street, because the cops are rolling up in style. With that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. This was a mini-series, so there are no more issues of this to cover unless Marvel decides to bring it back. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.